Hey, good morning, guys. So, I haven't done a YouTube stream for quite some time. I think after doing the TradingView show with Stefan on TradingView, I think I had a lot more kind of requests, I guess, in terms of updating and keeping people updated on TradingView. And obviously, I have a lot more followers on TradingView than I do on YouTube. So I still have difficulties with the connecting the two together. I know Paul's able to stream on TradingView and that gets straight uploaded to YouTube, but unfortunately, I haven't had that ability ever. We've tried with the admin in TradingView to kind of connect the two, but there seems to be some kind of issue with uploading to my specific YouTube channel. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cover just a little bit in terms of some of the things that I have covered. Now, if you haven't seen any of the TradingView streams, it's probably worth going back through some of the last ones. And what I've actually done in the last couple of streams, I've actually gone and put them down in the off topic, right? Now, obviously, there's a couple here that are then pretty obvious in terms of what I've explained, why I've explained, going through all the various bits and pieces. Um, this particular post was I had a very violent storm in the area. We had about 6 kilometers worth of fiber cable cut. We've had about 30 trees all gone down. So, in essence, it's been a bit of a strange time in that sense. But I guess the main message and the main point is that nothing's really changed for me in my original bias from that time frame, right? So, I guess bigger picture, it comes back to what I've posted, what I've said, what I've shared. I've put a lot of emphasis on what I've done recently with the book. Obviously, having a book published, Master the Art of Trading, I put a lot. I put a lot of my, I suppose my journey into this book, right? So when I first started, and what I was doing, how I was trading, it's definitely been an evolution, right? And I think starting with bigger stocks, kind of not really knowing or understanding, not really having anywhere to turn in terms of, mentors or anything. The trouble that I had in the location, in the area that I was brought up, trading was kind of not the done thing. When I first met my wife said, "Oh, you're a trader. How does that work? You don't live in London. You don't work for a bank." And I think this was the overall perception, for the area as the internet kind of evolved and trading online become more and more accessible, it obviously changed, what kind of info you had access to. I quickly migrated into Forex. I had a bit of a stint through the kind of penny stocks, and then ultimately things like Bitcoin and XRP and so on over the years. So I think it's just kind of this whole transition. What I've tried to do with the book is to cut a lot of the journey for you guys reading it to kind of accelerate you into the areas that you should be looking at, right? So the reason I wanted to highlight this is that in this particular book, on chapter 20, I've actually published, well, actually had published, I've actually published in this the the current view of Bitcoin, right? The current state of Bitcoin. So that's how confident, right? This isn't in hindsight, this is what I think the chart is going to do. I've put this in before the event, had this published. It's been out since May, and I'm still that confident, right? Nothing's changed. Nothing for me has changed, right? So again, if you haven't seen this, it's available on Amazon. Lots of really, big bookstores, WH Smith's, Waterstones, and so on. I've had people notify me saying it's available now in Australia, Singapore. I've even had sales out in South Korea, right? So it's literally all around the world. But coming back to obviously the point is that the big picture for me, nothing still has changed, right? There's a couple of things that I've put into these streams, right? So again, if you want to go into all of the detail you want to know inside out, there's also this post. Now, this was something I've just talked about this in the Discord channel this morning. I actually wrote this about 2, 3 weeks back, and only this morning had a notification saying I had another editor's pick for this particular post. Now, I've gone in again to a lot of detail inside this, right, as to why we're not ready for 100K yet, right? I've talked about in partly this post as well as some of the streams, as to the logic and what composite man is going to need, right? What kind of accumulation needs to occur for this to play itself up, right? Now, your local influencers, these guys are screaming for 250k. People like Plan B saying things like 10k a day candles, etc., etc., etc. And we're not seeing, any of these types of things, right? So the main thing for me is looking at the logic, right, to kind of deploy in just some common sense, right? The market doesn't have to go to the moon by Christmas, right? That isn't how the market works. If you're following, these clowns, these idiots, and you're clicking on their affiliate links and so on, you're kind of asking for trouble, right? If you take the time to come through some of these streams, to actually read through some of the posts, and not just flick through the posts, actually spend the time to understand what it is that I'm actually showing you, right? Now, a couple of things for me is the clear definition of the volume, right? You look at the rally, right? And you can say, even from where we were here, right? I click on this picture, right? If you look at the rally, as we get to the same kind of price point, the volume so much greater, right? Compared to this down here, right? Now, this thing is the first real indicator that we're not going anywhere anytime soon. The next thing was the stochastic. This is a monthly time frame, right? We've kind of gone up, we've ascended up, and we're already in the overbought territory, right? So for me, it's just common sense, right? We got OBV indication, again, similar thing. We're kind of flat, right? We've gone sideways and the market's gone up. That's just the definition of divergence, right? All of these things combined is just highlighting where we are right now, right? I've talked about things like COT data, right? Big players, this is the asset managers. Clearly, they're in this for the long run, right? This is the asset managers long, massive net positions, positive positions, right? This is a great sign, but this doesn't mean 100k next week, right? This doesn't mean 250k by Christmas. What this means is the interest is actually there, right? This is the big boys, big players coming into the market. This is the current situation on the leverage funds. Now, the leverage funds, this is a more localized view, right? We've actually had this kind of contraction. Right? Now we've now got a little bit more of an expansion, and the price is again relatively sideways, right? So these moves are the big players, Composite Man and kind of his team, right? In essence, buying under the radar, selling off previous positions from older entries, right? And accumulating new positions technically with profits that they've already made, right? So these guys are banking profits and then ultimately buying in again, right? So understanding how the market breathes, right, is obviously a real big factor. I've talked about this again, time and time again, right? All of these posts, if you click on this particular one, all of these posts are available on TradingView. I can't edit them, I can't change them, right? These are all calls that I made publicly prior to the event, right? All of these things are absolutely critical in terms of understanding where we are in the bigger move, right? I'm going back to January 2021, right? And I'm talking about why a reaccumulation was actually occurring, right? What was actually happening, why it was happening, how it was happening, right? And you'll see in a second when this loads up, you'll see the level of detail that I've covered even back then, right? I've gone into detail on every single aspect of what we were seeing and why, right? So you spend the time to flick through some of these posts and you're going to learn an awful lot in terms of where we are right now. Right now, I know for some of you guys, you're going to say to me things like, oh, the messages again, no change, nothing's changed, right? Well, in my opinion, my bias, nothing's changed. I've called this and I called this last year, right? We're still doing what I said we would be doing last year. In terms of where we go next, nothing has changed. What I've said is still playing itself out, right? So there's zero change in terms of up, down, sideways. We are kind of relatively sideways, right? We've got to take another move down. It doesn't have to be to 12K. It doesn't have to come to 9K, right? But we need another move down for composite man to load up, to distill the fear in retail to kind of go again. All right. So, in the grand scheme of things, right, where we are, like I said, right now, and what we're doing right now is no different than what I've said for the last year. Now, what I have done more recently is I've set up a prop firm channel within Discord. Right, let me come through to the um, subscriber section. We've actually got a prop firm channel where we've got some interactions going on about the current moves on some of the Forex pairs. Right now, I've talked quite heavily about obviously why I prefer Forex, right? Where and what's happening in the Forex market. I've talked about things all the way through. Right? We've had a bit of fun in this one. And obviously, some of these guys that are currently interacting and kind of using this channel, these guys are either going through or have recently passed these kind of prop firm type challenges. And this particular channel is, well, it was set up really to have more kind of one-to-one interaction, more kind of live, real time. This is what the market's doing, type of moves. And we've talked about these things, time and time and time again. And this is why I think for me the respect that we're seeing in things like Aussie dollar right now. We were talking yesterday. I said I had a move for 58. 2 pips out. This kind of respect, right, makes these markets very, very easy to trade. Okay, so on that particular note, what I want to do is, although I'll come back to Bitcoin in a second, I shared this morning in the visitor section, right, and this goes back to actually January. I thought this was May, right? It actually goes back to January. So first moves I was talking about. This is USD Japanese yen, right? Dollar yen. Why the move up was due, what we were likely to see, and why, right? And what have we done since? Right? We've rallied and we're rallying. Okay. This ties in back to DXY. This ties back into if DXY goes up, Bitcoin's likely to come down, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what the stock market will do. This was actually back in November last year. Right? I talked about GBP, JPY. This is the Dragon, the Widowmaker. This is a very, very tricky pair to trade, but it's still an awful lot easier than some of these kind of cryptocurrencies, some of these kind of shit coins, because you've actually got a very solid foundation as to what the market is trying to tell you, right? So, talking about the price going down, I then mentioned this, right? So that was November. This was January, right? This was January this year, so 7 months back, right? Again, you'll see this stream. You can even type this in, right? Look at this stream, okay? Where we were, kind of at the time, drawing out this zone, right? I've left that zone on the chart intentionally, right? And this is where and what we've done from that zone, right? 3, down 4. We've left the zone, come back to retest it, and off we went. That's a $30 move in one of the hardest Forex pairs to trade, right? This is how simple these things can be, guys. Right? So, my point being is that when you can read the market the way that I've talked about in the book, right? When you read through posts like this one, when you watch the streams that I've talked about step by step by step, breaking down each section of the logic, right? You can come back to looking at the charts and you can say, hey, I know exactly where we are and why we are where we are, right? We've got a couple of key levels, right? We've got a couple of things that are still playing themselves out, right? Where we are right now, we've got key levels of liquidity, right? So we've got to come down at least into this lower zone, if not a bigger pocket. So we don't have to come down in one go, but this is where the next line, the next big bucket of liquidity is currently sitting. Right, so there's the first one. We then had this distribution move. Right? I got to come down right down. I think this was actually a 4-hour time frame. I'll put this into 4 hour. Now I talked about this again, way in advance, right? This was shared even I think in the visitor section, and this was where we were talking about the distribution from before, right? This was the kind of move that we were seeing. What we've done since then is we've only come to test the underside of the distribution, which means in essence what we're actually doing, versus a rectangle, is this sideways move right now is playing itself as a redistribution, right? So you can read into this lots of different things. We've gone sideways, we've moved, we've expanded and contracted, but overall we've gone relatively sideways, right? You can put volume profiles on this and you can see key areas, key levels. Once we start breaching these levels, down it is that we go. Right? Whether that's 28 to 25 or lower, it doesn't really matter. We're probably likely to dart back up to get retail all excited all over again. Bull market's back, 250K by Christmas, all of the bullshit that these influencers will tell you. And then we're likely to drop down again for that bigger pocket of liquidity. Right? Talked about the money to the magnets, right? These things this is back on a bigger time frame. These key levels, again, this was talked about, I don't even know when. This was before this box here, right? So as we were tagging it the first time round, so I think this is further to the left. The point being, guys, right, is that, where is this lagging? The point being, right, is all of these things that you can see from space, right? All of these things, all of these points are all the areas that myself, Paul, we talk about on our streams. We've explained in detail. We've given kind of the logic, the background as to why these moves are likely to play themselves out the way that they play themselves out. Right? There's a lot of things happening. This is completely frozen. There's a lot of things happening, right, that we can see that are not just, oh, well, I think this could happen and that happens because the market, as I said with Stefan in that Trading View show, the market is just a giant algorithm, always seeking liquidity. The biggest point right now is when I call this move down to the money magnet, back to the money, where do you think we go next, right? We haven't gone to 100K. Where do you think we go next? We're looking to tap the next round of liquidity. These things happen, they play themselves out, and they move. It's not rocket science, okay? So, putting all this together, right, I've covered step by step by step. My apologies for not being active on YouTube, but in some regard, there hasn't really been that much to say. What I've already said on TradingView is still relevant. It's still live. It's still applicable today. In terms of where I think we go, I've covered that. Like I said, I've even published that in the book. So I guess in the grand scheme of things, guys, message from me is nothing's changed to what I've already said. We're still doing what we should be doing. We're early stage accumulation. COT data highlights that for me. It's clear as day. We're early stage accumulation. We will eventually get somewhere half decent. Are we ready to go there just yet? No, definitely not. I think we need a little bit more liquidity. We need to fill up that tank before we actually start to make a decent journey on the travels up. All right. So I'm going to leave it like that. Thanks for watching this one, guys, and I'll see you on the next stream. Cheers.